Wayne, good morning or good evening in your case. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself, Peter?
Great. I had a hectic morning, as I mentioned earlier, with a few technical issues that caused a bit of stress, but everything is under control now, or at least partial control, or at least I think they are under control. We'll see. We'll see later. But I'm very happy to have you on this podcast interview. I'm very excited to have you as the project leader of KiCad. As you know, KiCad is one of my favorite open source applications. It really helped me as a maker to create things. And let's say the motivation why I wanted to have you on, it's changed a lot over the years. And recently, last week, there was the first KiCon or KiCad conference ever, which was a resounding success. And we'll talk about that later as well. So as I said, it's a privilege to have you on. And how about we start with just a little bit of background. Tell us who you are, where you come from, and how eventually did you become the KiCad project leader?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to I'll distill it down into what the shortest version of it as I can. I'm actually an electronics engineer by education and experience. I graduated college in '86. Gosh, has it been that long? And
Wow.
I've been in industry of all over the map in terms of my skill set. Everything from embedded to analog to digital. I consider myself a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy. I started in 2006 working on KiCad. I started because I wanted to give something back to the open source community, and wasn't sure how to do that. I had actually started using open source software all the way back in about 2000, at least regularly. So I kind of looked around for a while, trying to figure out where I could apply my skills. And it just dawned on me one day, because using some of the tools that were available commercially that I wasn't all that happy with, maybe I should see what's out there. And I, found KiCad, or rather KiCad found me, and started contributing back in the early days, long before it was even on, before KiCad was even put on any kind of code hosting service like SourceForge. It was just, you go download the source archive and build and, send patches back to Jean-Pierre at the time. And so then then things kind of picked up from there. So anyway, yeah, that's my background. I'm actually not a programmer by trade. I'm a programmer that's self-taught. And, up until, as you may have heard, up until last week, I was just working on KiCad part-time. Now I'm being paid to work on KiCad full-time.
Yeah. Well, let's, I want to go back to 2006, right? KiCad was, I didn't know about it at that time. Like, I discovered KiCad around 2011 or 12, I believe. It was maybe version 2. Very hard to use back then. So I've got to admit that it didn't really stick.
Oh, no.
So it was a pain, yeah, right? But you're a contributor from 2006. What was your contribution like? Were you contributing as a programmer perhaps, or as documentation person, or what was those early days like?
I was actually using, or I was attempting to use KiCad at where I worked. I had changed jobs with a small startup, and rather than spend a lot of capital on some of the commercial products, because we were just doing little test interface boards and I didn't really need anything. I thought, this might be a good, start out small and test KiCad. And of course, it became quickly obvious there were a lot of things that needed worked on. So I started digging around in the code, and yeah, it was interesting to say the least. All the comments were in French. Some of the code, some of the actual function names and whatnot were in French, the classes. So I realized that was the first order of business was, changing all that so I could understand what the code did. So I spent probably the first, I would say, good year and a half that I worked on KiCad, just doing that, is cleaning up the code,
French.
yep, and getting the formatting all cleaned up, and then getting all the French stuff translated to English. And so using Google Translate, so when things didn't make any sense in the translation, I actually had to go back and kind of figure out what the code did, right? So I could, fix the internal documentation. So once we got that done, that whole process, I started seeing like things in the code that I realized that if KiCad was going to ever expand, we had to clean up. So there was a lot, probably the first 3 years that I was with the project, it was just refactoring and code cleaning, just to get the code base to a manageable place. Yeah, I mean, we did, I did a lot of fixes and whatnot during that time, but nothing major. I didn't really add any new features or anything like that. It was just get the code base where it was workable so other people could even contribute to it. So that's how I started. And go ahead.
So what was the rest of the back then? So the original creator of KiCad, Jean-Pierre, I think his name,
yes,
was still in the project. Is he still with the project today in 2019?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Jean-Pierre. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So I wonder back then when you were doing all this refactoring work and really setting the stage for KiCad to grow, and we'll get to that later, to version 5 and then version 6, which is coming out, I believe, later this year. There was a lot of work to be done. What was that kind of decision making inside the group that you had, with the people that you had? I guess everybody was part-time contributors, so it was like a loosely integrated group. So I wonder how a particular decision was made to move the project in a particular direction. If you could describe that in a few words, I guess.
Sure. Well, a lot of people don't know Jean-Pierre, JP, which we affectionately call him. He started the project in 1992. So it's been around for a very, very long time. And he pretty much worked on it by himself. For those of you who don't know, JP he was a professor at a university in France, and don't ask me to pronounce the name. So he created KiCad for his students so they could design boards for his students that he was teaching. So it kind of grew. He was basically a one-man show. I'm guessing based on some of the code that I saw, he probably had some programming students contribute, because it had a very, sophomore college academic kind of, I mean, you could tell that they weren't experienced programmers, that were working on it. So it kind of grew into
Arduino a little bit. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It kind of, so that went on for that went on for, quite a long time. So you can imagine the code base was pretty messy by the time in 2006, Dick Hollenbeck, the first project leader, convinced JP to make the code public and put it on a hosting site, which originally it was with SourceForge. So that was when I got involved, right when all that was taking place. That's when I got involved. So basically the three of us kind of made all the decisions together, because Jean-Pierre wasn't really interested in running a project. He doesn't speak any English. So he writes English okay, but I think even then he needs some help. So that's why I don't think and he's kind of shy. I had a chance to meet him. So I don't think that was really something he was really interested in. So he graciously, we wouldn't be here having this conversation if he wasn't gracious enough to, kind of let go of his baby and turn it, let it loose into the wider world. And so, we decided that we would try to make KiCad as good as we could with the manpower that we had. But we knew in order for that to happen, we had to do a lot of cleanup before we started the next phase.
Yeah, and I guess that cleanup is the boring work, right? It's not like you're pumping out exciting new features that people are like, wow, look at that. It's all under the hood, so you don't really witness it as the end user. But in order to get to where you are now, you have to do that work. And that sounds so familiar. As makers, we really like to get in and do some quick and dirty experimentation and get something done, but then we get bored when it's time to fix it up and improve it and make it reliable, and then something that we can build on later, right?
Right. No, I mean, it is a thankless job, but you have to at some point you have to decide where you want the project to go. I mean, if we would have stayed in that, bolt here, bolt something on there, but it would have never been able to grow the way it has. I mean, it would have been completely impossible to add on in any meaningful way to the original code base. So the work just had to be done. So sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves and make that sacrifice.
Yep, the hard work. Somebody's got to do it. Well, I'm thinking now about the community, because in 2006, in terms of number of users, still at the very beginning of that upward trend, and you are competing with applications like Eagle, for example, that everybody knows about, and there's so much documentation. It's all its problems ironed out, so there's competition. But then the project starts to pick up and people know about it. Even I hear about it, say around 2011. I wonder, how do you then start to listen to what the community is saying? So then that the feedback that is coming from the community, how does that contribute into the project?
Well, I think it's been really beneficial. I mean, the community has been really good about testing, reporting bugs. I'm always surprised about the number of people who run the nightly builds. I mean, because anything goes there. I mean, now one of the things we've tried to do as a project is keep nightly, or the master branch, as stable as possible. But of course, anytime as you're introducing new features, things go wrong. But we have a really large group of people who, are really get bug reports out right away, so we can fix those, and so that branch stays usable. In fact, when I was working, I pretty much ran a nightly build when I worked. Now, I always kept a stable build just in case things weren't working and I had to get work done. But yeah, I think the community has done us a big favor by, running nightly builds and testing. So that's been invaluable. And they also kind of shape the big feet, like the next version. They shape the features that kind of go in, because we have a pretty good idea based on feedback from our users what they want the most. Of course, sometimes other things have to go in because the thing that they want depends on something else. So it's not always as cut and dried as, giving the people what they want. But generally speaking, we try to base our decisions for the next release version on, or like the next development cycle, on the user feedback.
And you as a leader, that's your responsibility, right? Or one of those responsibilities is to triage, I guess, what your team is going to be working on next, based on a lot of factors, including feedback from the community and, you as the lead engineer, I guess, where you think the project should go, because it's also a personal thing. Is that how it works?
Yeah. It works. In the end, I have the final say, being the project leader. But for the most part, we don't really have. I mean, I think I have a pretty good feel for what the users want and what my development, what our development team, what the KiCad development team can provide, and their technical skills and what they are willing to work on. So it is a balancing act. I mean, there's never any, if I had a blank check and I could do whatever, yeah, things would be a little different. But given our development team, we really have a solid team. I couldn't ask for a better group of people to work with. So it makes my job a lot easier. There's.
Great, like bringing up the team now, because there's a few ways I can, like a few questions I can ask at this point. And I was thinking community, maybe talk about KiCad next, because it is a big expression of what the community looks like at this point in time, but maybe leave that for just another couple of minutes and talk about the team next. So the team obviously has grown. We're now in 2019. You joined the project more than 10 years ago. It was 3 people back then. And what is the team like now?
Oh, well, when I say team, I'm looking out past just the developers, because KiCad's a lot more than just the applications, the source code. We have a whole group of people that provide libraries, symbols, footprints, 3D packages. We've got a group of people that do the translations into foreign languages. We've got a group of people that create the packages, the installers for all the different platforms. There's people that work on documentation. There's people that maintain the websites, the web page, or all that stuff. There's people that maintain the CI build, the constant integration builds. So it really is a much larger group of people than the immediate development team. Right now we have about, I would say, 6, 7 lead developers that contribute regularly. And there's a couple more that don't contribute as much anymore as they used to. So I think we have like 10 or 12 people on the lead development team. Then there's probably a couple dozen contributors who do just, small contributions here and there. Then you have the librarians. That's a pretty big group. I see quite a few people contributing to that. I would say in total, it's probably like 50 or 60 people, maybe more, that are pretty regular contributors to KiCad. So it's a big group. I mean,
And would they be like distributed around the world?
Oh yeah,
like
we have people all over the place. Yeah. Yes, we have people. I mean,
there's no KiCad office, right?
Nope. Yeah, I'm sitting in it right now. It's my office. I mean, we have a couple.
Now you are.
Yes.
Sorry, Wayne. So I was about to say you are now a full-time contributor to the project. You've employed by WIT full-time to work on KiCad. Is it like unique in the group, or are there like how is the group funded? If it is funded.
Well, it is funded somewhat by donations. Okay, it's kind of there's actually several things going on there. We have the KiCad donation site, which is through CERN. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah.
But CERN also pays 2 developers, not full-time, but part-time to work on KiCad. So part of their time as work at CERN, they contribute to KiCad. And then there's some people.
CERN engineers.
Yes, CERN engineers. Well, one's a programmer and one's an engineer. And they've been with the project since CERN joined in, I think CERN joined in 2010 or 2011. Oh, so, yep, there's the donation.
I'm just showing.
And then so what?
Yeah. So that's how the engineers are funded.
Well, no, they're paid directly from CERN. Those donations actually go to pay people to contribute projects. So some of the other lead developers, like, will work up a work package for a new feature, and we'll assign one of the lead developers that, and then they'll get paid when it's done. So the donations that go to CERN can only be used to pay developers to, write software. And the nice thing about donating to CERN is there's no overhead. So every dollar you give to CERN goes to KiCad development.
Specifically. Yeah, that's right. And I think this started, I'll rephrase that. KiCad 5, I believe, was funded this way, right? And KiCad 6 now, you have, the donations through CERN have funded or are funding the development for KiCad 6.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And I believe
Yes.
it's funded at the moment.
It's not funding all of it because some of our developers, most of them are part-time. The rest of our lead development team is just doing it on the side. They have full-time jobs doing something else. Almost without exception, I think they're all electronics engineers. So they use KiCad where they work, and so they help contribute to its development. So
great. So that's what I like about this project. Like it's funding, it's support from the community, can be translated, but then the classic, part-time programmer model that has worked for so many other open source projects, like Apache, for example, Nginx and all that. Like it's still valid. So you've got a mix of sources for productivity. I'd say you're full-time, supported by a private company that is graciously basically allowing you all the time that you need to work as a leader on the project. And then there's a lot of other engineers, some of them directly paid by CERN, others by the donation through CERN. And then there's, I don't know, hundreds, maybe thousands of people that contribute documentation, libraries, translations, right? So,
and they do that for in their spare time for free. So,
is it possible to put a number to the number of, like, to the size of the project based on the number of contributors that are active, even at a small scale, like a small amount of time per week or per month? Would it be in thousands maybe, or hundreds?
Probably, I would say the hundreds total. Even people that contribute just, they might contribute a symbol here or a translation there. So yeah, it's probably in the hundreds.
So
I don't think it's in the thousands yet.
Great.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, working there.
Well,
I'd like to talk about the switch and talk about the community. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, because I'm looking at the time as well. I'd like to fit as much as possible to our conversation. So let's switch to the community. And the KiCad had its first conference in Chicago last week that I missed work, unfortunately, but I hope I can make the next one. And it was a resounding success. I'm looking here at all the beer that was consumed and the fun that was had after the official part of the conference with the lectures. So did you want to tell us, would you like to tell us a little bit about it, especially the motivation for the first KiCad conference? It's a big event, takes effort to organize it, takes a lot of time. Chris Gamble was the organizer here. I'm not sure, he probably had help from others, but he's the lead person conference. What was the motivation behind the conference, Wayne?
Well, that's interesting because I've been going to FOSDEM, which is the biggest open source software conference in Europe for the last 5 years, and I've been giving a talk on KiCad, and it's been really well received. It actually exceeded any expectations I ever had of, the kind of attendance that, some of the other big projects get. So Chris was there, I think 2 years ago, and he saw the enthusiasm, and he came to me, I don't remember when it was, and asked me if I'd be interested in doing KiCon. And I'm like, well, if you think we can get enough people to turn out, I'm like, sure, I think it'd be a great idea. I don't know how successful we'll be, but I told him at that time, obviously I was still working a full-time job and working part-time on KiCad. I'm like, Chris, I can give you absolutely zero help other than, sitting in on a conference call every once in a while. It was all him. I just told him to take the ball and run. And yeah, boy, did he ever. He did a great job. I can't imagine anybody doing a better job than what he did. And of course he obviously had some help. There were volunteers, but so I think he was the point man, and he made it happen. So, and it turned out fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see here. So what was the attendance like?
It was interesting. About a month and a half before the event, we had only sold about 110 to 120 tickets, which would have been probably not anything to feel bad about. But that last month and a half leading up to the event, they sold out all 220 tickets. So they actually ended up having to turn people away. So it was pretty amazing.
So you need a bigger venue next time. So there were, just to talk about KiCad, actually, let me search for it here, about what did I miss out on by not being able to make it.
Well,
talks about, there was teaching, there was your keynote as well.
Yeah, it was, everything about it was good. The talks there were good talks all over KiCad. You had, there was the usual technical talks. There were some great industry talks. You had the folks from System 76 and Snap EDA. And there were some good maker talks, people doing, those things that you don't kind of expect from KiCad or from KiCad. So like, I noticed when you had the pictures up, did you see the coffin board? Did you see the coffin project? If you look down,
yes.
Well, the badge was cool. That was great stuff.
There we go.
That's the badge. And if you go down a little further, there's it's a purple board that looks like a coffin. And the guy that did that was a woodworker, right. Which was, so he gave an interesting talk about how he did that. Yeah, there it is on the left.
Yeah.
So yeah. So the talks were all good. The vendors were all set up. We had a lot of, the sponsors we had an amazing group of sponsors. So everything was taken care of. The food, there was breakfast and lunch, both days. And there was after hours events. Well, there was a kind of a pre-event on Thursday night. And then there was a really neat event on Friday night at the Maker Space in Chicago. And it was really neat. So we went there and saw their facility. And then, of course, the pictures you see at the everybody raising their glasses, that was Saturday night at a place called Jefferson Tap in Chicago. So the after hours events, the after hours events were excellent. And I think the thing that really struck me was how excited everybody was. It was really a high energy conference. People were just excited about KiCad and the possibilities going forward. So, yeah, I think the future is really bright.
So
every
you have a community, right?
From the maker space all the way up to the commercial space.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the future, you had a keynotes. You were the keynote speaker for the conference, and here's you down here, the first day, State of KiCad and Version 5.1 and beyond. I'm very interested to know, could you put that in a nutshell? Like, what is, even if the team or yourself are not committed to a particular future, and maybe you don't know exactly what it's going to be like, what do you think it might be like? What should KiCad users, current, future, perhaps, should expect from KiCad?
Well, you can watch my talk, and then that'll give you probably a more comprehensive view. But kind of a rough outline is we're finally going to update the schematic and symbol library file formats, which it's been on our list for a long time. In fact, I'm going to probably I am doing all that work. That lays the foundation for a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of features that we haven't been able to provide. Things like pin and gate swapping, selectable pin names for symbols. There's a whole bunch of, any one of about a dozen features, both in the board editor and the schematic editor, that kind of depend on that. But above and beyond that, there's we already have hash zone fills that are done. We've got some improvements to the footprint generation tool in terms of pads, both rectangular pads and polygons or complex pad shapes. There's a lot of work going on there. Then the auto router, there's significant changes to the auto router coming up. Not the auto router, the push shelf router. Sorry about that. So that's happening. There's the schematic editor is going to be completely redesigned with the new tool framework. So like all the nifty features that you have in the board editor, like snapping and complex, highlight or complex selection, those are all going to come into the schematic editor, which should make it a lot nicer to work with. Let's see. We're going to have pad stacks.
Like the usability and flexibility, but the way to get there is how the libraries work and the format for the libraries. So that's where you're starting now.
Yeah.
And that's, is it KiCad 6 or at least part of that? Is
KiCad 6. And if you can always go, I know it's a little out of date, but I'm getting ready to update that here probably any day now, but you can always go to the KiCad website. And if you go into the developer documentation, there's a link to the roadmap. And so you can always see what we're working on. So if you go if you go to the KiCad website, and it's under, it's under contribute.
Yep.
And developers. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see, when you get there, did you not get there? Yeah. Scroll down a little bit, you'll see the, that still points to the version 5 roadmap. But if you click on that, you'll see all of it. Yeah, right there, and getting started. Right. Yeah, click that. And then you should see, this is all of the KiCad developer documentation. On the left-hand side, you'll see on the left-hand side, you'll see a pane that you'll be able to see version V6 roadmap.
There you go.
There it comes. And you can click on that, version 6. And then there's all the things and so there's a lot of things going on. Both in the board and the schematic editors. So there's a lot of work. It's pretty ambitious if we get it all done.
It's very ambitious. What's the time frame? Is this going to be available to people, at least like a stable version this year, 2019?
No, I doubt it. It's pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
what we've been doing in the past is about a 2-year burn, but now that I'm working full time on KiCad, we should be able to cut that down by a lot. One of the problems was when I was working part time, we now have enough developers that I was becoming the bottleneck. In other words, I couldn't get around to reviewing patches, answering questions fast enough, and I was slowing KiCad's development down. But now I can get on, now I can work on get those done right away so that people who need to know or need an answer can get an answer quickly, and then they can continue on with what they're doing. And I'll have enough time to actually do some coding again. Because really in the last year and a half, I haven't done very much coding at all. It's just been project maintenance.
Yeah, and those things take long times. Just half joking here, Wayne. If you like updating the versions or progressing through the version, get very fast, like from 5 to 6 within less than a year, that puts a lot of stress on myself because I will have to update the book. And that's a pretty big project as well. So yeah, I'm always thinking about, okay, how much of the book is now in my queue for an update as well, because the KiCad has changed. So that's one of the, I think, really good aspects of the new structure in the team and how the team works, because KiCad was in version 4 for a few years, right? And then very quickly went to 5, and then 6 is in the works right now. So I've noticed that the productivity has increased a lot, and going through versions and new features has accelerated compared to what it used to be like. So I guess momentum is increasing.
Well, yeah, that's because of the increase in the new development. Like you said, we have in the last about year and a half, 2 years, we've got 4 new members to the lead development team, and they've been very consistent contributors, which has helped a lot. I mean, that's really helped the project move forward pretty quickly.
Great. I wonder now, just we'll start wrapping it up and concluding for this interview. And like my next question is this: like, imagine that you are an engineer and you've been working. You are, but you need a computer-aided design program to build your PCBs with, and you have a lot of choice. Like there's the traditional commercial applications like Protel, OrCAD, Eagle, and most of those have got a free version. So the meta issue is not always a problem. Most of those have got a free version. And of course, there's open source, there's KiCad, and there's a few others. Why would such person choose KiCad? And that person, like, just to put a bit of context, like it could be a maker, like a lot of our listeners. So a single person designing a single project, not necessarily in a team, or maybe in a small team, right? Why would such person choose to work with KiCad?
Well, there's several reasons. I mean, one, I'm not sure the communities around those other projects. Eagle used to have a pretty good community, but I think since Autodesk has taken them over, they've managed to alienate their community somewhat. So with their licensing changes, and that's one nice thing that's one thing you don't have to worry about ever happening to KiCad. We're not going to ever change our license. I mean, you can't. There's too much code from too many people that it's always going to be the GPL. So there's that. Now some people don't consider that a risk. Some people do. I think the whole Eagle mess was a good indication of just how tenuous that can be. So yeah, it's a decision you have to make. But the community around KiCad is really solid. And so if you're looking for, a community to help support you with whatever it is you're doing, KiCad's very good at that. I think the other thing where KiCad's interesting is there's a move in open hardware these days that's really, it kind of almost has the feel of, for those of us who are old enough to remember when the open source, free or open source software movement started way back when. It has that, the open hardware movement
The 90s.
has that same kind of feel. Like we're like right on the cusp of something much bigger. And in order for any design to be truly open, you have to be able to have the, the tools have to be freely available. In fact, that's what kind of motivated CERN to help KiCad. CERN has an open hardware license, and I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but one of their mandates as an organization is, because they're publicly funded, all of their development has to be open to the public, right? So they created a hardware license so that they could, open their hardware designs to the public. What they realized was all their stuff was done in Altium. Well, yes, technically their designs were open, but practically they weren't, because not everybody can justify the cost of Altium. So that's kind of what drove CERN to contribute to KiCad. So if you are working towards open hardware designs, KiCad is really your best choice. It doesn't make sense to do an open design in a proprietary product, because at any time they could decide, nope, we're not going to let you do that anymore. And that's something you don't have to worry about with KiCad. So there are, and it's a
Very
tool
true.
it's a tool that's only going to get better from here. If the feature you just got to have isn't available yet, you're probably only going to have to wait to the next version until it's available. And I'd like to just comment on one more thing. I think there's a little bit of confusion out there about how powerful KiCad is in its current state. We actually have a gentleman who designs, he has a board with a 700 pin FPGA on it that's 30 layers. It's immensely complex. And he's actually been asking us for more layers, which hopefully we can do in version 7. So if you don't believe that KiCad is powerful enough to do really highly complex work, I don't think you've looked at it closely enough.
And you do have a page here where you highlight projects built with KiCad, and look at that. Like, it's amazing. Like, these are complex devices. They have pretty much all of the features that you expect highly condensed and integrated board to have. And these are all made, actually most of these would be made with an earlier version of KiCad as well, because these projects have been here for a while. So there's a lot of power here.
And the beauty of all those projects is they're all online. So if you want to check, I think almost all of them are on GitHub. You can check them out, check out the project files in KiCad, and play around. Modify the designs to heart's
I've got to say, so Wayne, I wanted to ask you maybe one or two last questions to wrap up this interview. And here's the first one. So if somebody wants to contribute, so one of our listeners, so people that are listening to this interview want to contribute to the project in some way other than a direct contribution donation through CERN, how do they go about doing that? Do you have a place, for example, where you say we need a person to document, we need a programmer, we need some other skill set? How do they go about contributing?
Well, if you want to contribute to the KiCad applications by patches or whatnot, you would go to Launchpad. That's where we currently host our source code for KiCad, and you would join the developers mailing list, and then you probably would submit a patch. There's instructions on how to do that in the remember that developers document that I took you to for the roadmap. There's some there's some hints in there how to become, help you become a developer. And there's also some on the website itself.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. So you go to this page here for developers, and there's Launchpad, where the source code is used. And this is open source, means you can download it, make changes, contributions, and then you can push it back into Launchpad, where one of your team will then accept a patch or a contribution.
Yep. Yeah, we'll we will do a patch review and comment on it, and if it gets accepted, then it'll get merged. And I generally tell people to start small. KiCad's not a lightweight project by any stretch of the imagination. It's pretty serious code base. I think we're over 1 million lines of code now, so it's not easy to just jump right in and contribute.
Yeah. And you're one of the few projects, like CAD projects, that are cross-platform compatible. I think that was also one of the big reasons of why someone would select KiCad, right? It's very rare. It works everywhere.
Oh, yeah. I think, as far as I know, Eagle's the only other one that's on all 3 major platforms.
Yeah.
I don't think any of the other big commercial vendors support. Most of them are Windows only.
Yeah. Great. When is the next KiCon going to be held?
I don't know. We'll have to ask Chris. I have to laugh because right when the conference kicked off, somebody made a comment that maybe every other year we should go to Europe. So we have KiCon in the United States one year and then KiCon in Europe the next year. But
don't forget Australia.
What's that?
Don't forget Australia.
Yeah, I'd like to come to Australia. Haven't been there yet.
Yeah, no, it's awesome here, and we should do one.
If now that I actually work on KiCad, I can justify traveling now.
Yeah, glad to help in any way I can. So we'll be in touch. Well, I'm going to let you close any way that you like. One thing that I ask always is, how do people get in touch with you? So maybe you can briefly tell us about what your preferred method of communication with people from around the world, and then just take it away and tell us anything you want, any message you have for people that use KiCad today, or people that are potentially going to use KiCad, makers.
Let's see. What was the first part of that question again?
How do people get in touch with you?
Oh, how do people? Probably the best way is through the developers mailing list, unless it's something that directly needs my attention. Nowadays, I'll actually have more time for that stuff. But if you email me directly, if it's something that's related to KiCad in general, somebody else might be able to answer that question faster than I can. But if it's something that, that only a question that only I can answer, then generally speaking, it's email is my preferred medium.
Yep. Are you on Twitter, Facebook?
It's not perfect, but it's the best we have when we're online.
Yeah, email works, like reliable.
Yeah.
Are you on social media?
I do. I may actually start now. Before I got hired, there just wasn't time. It was just, there just wasn't, I wasn't burning any cycles doing that because it was, I was on full, I'd come home from work in the evening and work on KiCad for a while, and there wasn't a lot of free time. So I have not done the social media thing, although I'm thinking about maybe doing YouTube videos or something in the future, just for like communications.
Yeah.
Maybe simple, add some stuff. There is a KiCad YouTube channel. There's not a lot on it yet, but I hope that will happen. And there's also a Twitter feed, which maybe I'll start doing project updates from that. But in the past, no, I haven't.
Yeah, it's a good way of communication, especially Twitter. I like it, although I don't use it as much. I have the same problem as you, but it's a way to broadcast short messages, and each of those messages can just be like 100 characters, quick update, and it doesn't burn too many cycles, brain cycles, compared to writing a whole blog post, which is something that I'm doing now for one of my previous interviews, and it takes like half a day. It's a big job. All right. So then the next thing that I wanted to ask you was to just anything that comes to mind, and a message perhaps for current KiCad users and people that will perhaps be using KiCad in the future, something that like a message that you want to pass over to them.
Well, I think the biggest thing is just to say thank you. I mean, the support is overwhelming sometimes. I mean, it really is humbling. I never expected this project to get to where it is today. If you would have told me 13 years ago that I'd be sitting here today having an interview about KiCad and I'm now being paid full time to run the project, I would have laughed at you. Yeah. I would have thought that was completely absurd. I certainly never started out with that in mind, but thanks to the community of people who not only use KiCad, but who've stepped up and helped with the development in, you know, all the areas that, you know, KiCad has developers. It's really been a humbling experience. And I hope we can take it. You know, my goal for the project is, you know, one of the things I really, because I'm an engineer, my goal for KiCad is to make it the best possible product that I can for board designers, you know, because guys have to get work done. That means at the highest levels. You know, I'm not just trying to make a simple product for people to go make simple things with. I mean, you'll always be able to do that with KiCad. But in the end, I think the real goal is to drive KiCad as far as we can. Yeah. We have the team in place with the technical skills to do it. So I think it's just a matter of time. I really do.
Definitely.
You know?
Well, thank you.
You can see like a community building up around that, like people writing Python scripts and stuff like that have really helped drive KiCad into places that I would have not expected it to go. So like I said, thank you to everyone who organized KeyCon. Thank you to everyone who uses KiCad and who's donated. And I'd like to thank you for inviting me on your show and for this interview.
My pleasure, Wayne. And I want to thank you now for all the work that you've done. And I'm thanking you as a maker who uses KiCad every day. I use KiCad in my courses. I'll use KiCad for my personal little projects. It really has changed the way that I work. And that is thanks to people like yourself, Jean-Pierre, the whole team, hundreds of contributors, hundreds of, perhaps thousands of people that have donated. So it's just amazing of where you can go with in a communal effort, with sustained effort over a few years, because, you know, things don't happen overnight. It takes, for KiCad, 30 years almost. Perseverance, like you got to stick with it, and eventually you do have something that is amazing and truly worth talking about and working on. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, so I hope that everybody enjoyed this interview. If you have questions, please put them down in the comments below, and you can always get in touch with Wayne directly or through the mailing list as well. And looking forward to the next KiCon. I'll try to make it, and to KiCad 6 later this year. There's going to be an amazing release.
Great. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, have a good day, Wayne. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye now.